G'day everyone, Mike here, and welcome to another edition of the Beyond Billables podcast. Wherever you're listening around the world, thank you for tuning in. And today we have a guest from the US, the one and only S02. Now, Alex, you may know if you're on TikTok, if you're on Instagram, he makes amazing content, meme content and joke content, especially about legal services and about the legal profession. So we spoke about that. We spoke about his role as head of community and engagement at Ironclad, what that meant, what Ironclad was doing, and the opportunities that are there for lawyers and legal tech providers to reach an audience using content. Alex has done it himself. He has been a lawyer at a top firm, and we spoke about that and the transition into different business roles that he's made. And we spoke a lot about his tactics with TikTok, with short video, and the opportunity that he sees for the entire industry there. So I hope you enjoy the show. Alex, welcome to the Beyond Billables podcast. Now, what does a head of community and engagement at Ironclad do?
Mike, great to be on the show. A lot of people ask me that question about my job. We are on the Ironclad community team, and we are trying to create a community around digital contracting. So my job is to make sure people are talking to each other, keeping people engaged, whether through events or the online forum. So it's a lot of different things. So it's a relatively new position, and it's not something that a lot of companies have, but I think we're going to see more of it in the future.
Yeah, it's really interesting, mate. Obviously, you are well known around the world as, being on TikTok and using short video to reach an audience. And I really wanted to talk about that because that's how I came across you and through mutual friends. But I thought, let's go back to the start of your story, really, because you were an attorney at a leading firm. Tell us about your story in the law and how you've ended up at Ironclad.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to law school because I wanted to be a trial lawyer and went into the business and took a pretty standard career path. I clerked for a judge. I worked as a litigator in a large firm. And I quickly found that it wasn't for me, and I wasn't really sure what to do. So I tried different jobs. I went to a smaller firm. I opened my own practice and really just crossed things off my list and realized they weren't a good fit for me. And about 5 years ago, I made the jump to legal tech in a sales role because I had done some work with political campaigns and realized I was really good at cold calling, liked to work with people. And I figured, well, sales might be a good fit. Legal tech is growing. I was in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, and I thought I could leverage my legal experience to do well at that job. So I just dove right into legal tech sales 5 years ago. Continued on that path for 5 years until earlier this year, joined Ironclad as the head of community development. And yeah, it's been a fun ride. And I'm not exactly sure where this is all taking me. I've kind of accepted that I'm not going to have a typical linear career path, but I really enjoy what I do, and I really enjoy working with the community, talking to people, meeting people, and engaging with the community, whether it's through digital contracting with Ironclad or putting out TikToks and engaging with folks on LinkedIn. So that's how I ended up where I am.
Amazing. And look, I think that point of transition is really, really interesting to me because I know that you stepped out at a leading firm and you really had to start again. What was that process like, going back to, essentially back to the bottom and having to work your way through and taking a sales role?
It was tough at first. My first role, I had to report to someone who was a few years out of college. I was 33 at the time, and I had all this experience. So it was kind of challenging to do that. But I knew that it was a better bet because the role was more aligned to my unique set of skills, my strengths versus my weaknesses. And I had already done a lot of different jobs in the legal field where I knew that it wasn't as good of a fit for me. A lot of that work was not a good fit for my personality. And looking back now, that first role in legal tech, starting off at the bottom, doing sales, really gave me the perspective to help create content that is really valuable, not just from an entertainment perspective, but from a business development perspective. Because once you understand the fundamentals of selling and marketing, you can really create content that drives inbound leads and generates pipeline.
So on that content, when did you start making short video, and when did you actually start producing things and building the Alex Sue brand that we see now?
It's so funny because I only recently realized that I have a brand. I just make things that I think people like and see if I can make them better. I started making videos about a year ago. I guess I've been making videos for a long time, but never anything seriously, never anything with any consistency. Right when I was back when I ran my own firm. This was 6 years ago maybe. I occasionally made a couple of YouTube videos, some very silly videos, just to experiment. And when I first got into legal tech sales, I was told, hey, you should be on LinkedIn. You should go on LinkedIn, post content, and it'll help you create a presence, and people will reach out to you for business. And so I did that. And I started off by posting legal tech industry articles, which is what a lot of people do. Nobody really liked it. So I started pivoting. I started adapting to what I thought people liked, which was, okay, I'll start telling stories about my legal career. I'll talk about why I left the law. I'll talk about my experiences working at a big firm. And that content actually got more traction because I think people like to hear stories. They wanted to hear that kind of thing, as opposed to me saying, here's what's happening in the legal tech space. So I did that for a year or two as I was coming up in sales. And then one day somebody actually reached out to me and said, hey, I've been following your content for a while, but what I really want to know is, can I get a product demo of your product, because I might need it. And so that was when I first realized the power of content in generating sales and generating inbound leads and interest. And so I started focusing on it even more, continued posting, and did that for a total of about 5 years before the pandemic, maybe 4 or 5 years before the pandemic. It wasn't until the pandemic hit when I was like, okay, I think that I've got to try even more new things. And so I tried a million different things. I created meetups where I would host 30 or 40 person conversations on Zoom for people to meet each other. I posted a lot of really controversial posts, tried to experiment with things to get people talking to each other, to comment. And the other thing I did was I started experimenting with creating short form videos, making fun of some aspect of the legal profession. And those were the most popular pieces of content that I had ever made. I didn't expect so many people to like them. So I said, okay, this is working. Let me just keep doing that. And so maybe in my third or fourth video, some of these folks started reaching out to me and saying, hey, I think you should get on this new platform. It's called TikTok, and you should try it out. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll run with that. I'll try it out. I have no presence on TikTok. I think it's for kids, so I'll just make videos there because I think editing might be easier there. Make the videos and put them onto LinkedIn. And so that's how I started doing it. And my fourth video on TikTok went massively viral, like 2 million views. I did not expect that. And so I thought, well, hey, I might have stumbled into something here. I'm going to focus on this more consistently. And so I, since then, have continued to make videos. I built up a little bit of a following there. I've been reposting it on Instagram and also on LinkedIn. So my videos have been viewed by a lot of people. And yeah, I couldn't imagine that that's what I'd be doing now.
So it's amazing, mate. I mean, the humor element and the meme element is really interesting because obviously, you had experience, you were doing something before. I guess, did you just roll the dice and think, look, I might as well do something different here? It's actually, the platform gives me this opportunity. Or what was your thought process? Was there much of a thought process? Was it just more like, I'm just going to test and try things out?
Well, by the time I had made my first video, I had a sense of what my audience liked and didn't like, because I've been doing this for 4 years in text form. And so I understood that most people that were following my content, they like the entertainment, they like the humor. And so I thought, well, it's got to be something funny. It's also authentic to me because I don't take myself very seriously. So I knew it would be along those lines, but I wasn't sure exactly what topic to put out. But I thought about what I knew, right? I knew that I had been a practicing lawyer. There were a lot of things I felt were strange and wrong about our profession. We have these weird traditions and rules. And a lot of us are unhappy. A lot of practicing lawyers are unhappy. So I thought, well, if I could make fun of those elements, the things that we all kind of grumble about privately, maybe that would be entertaining to people. So I just put one out and then another and another, and I kind of listened to what the audience was saying, right? I tried to create a conversation, because when you put out a piece of content like a video, people will respond in comments. I remember one of my earliest videos before I got on TikTok was making a joke about how in-house lawyers have great work-life balance, because that was what I thought. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
A lot of the commenters responded saying, hey, actually working in-house is actually a lot of work. We work long hours. And so I began to adapt and to reflect that reality, even though I had never worked in-house and I was believing some of these stereotypes about in-house lawyers. So over time it evolved. I did a lot of listening. I do a lot of listening, because I think the most interesting conversations that are happening in law right now are happening in response to memes and TikToks. Like, you've got your standard legal journalism, you've got your articles where people are saying things like the firm leadership or high-level CLOs and GCs. But the rank and file, those who are closer to the ground of the profession, like kind of doing the work on the front lines, the comments in, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn, people are sharing their real experiences. And I take that information and I turn them into content. And that's why they've been popular.
So that response, I guess, how have you managed that professionally? Because you've got a job, and like everyone, you have to manage that. I mean, what has the response been, positive or negative, and how do you manage that?
Well, I think that I'm in a unique situation because I don't practice law. I think that it's a lot harder and more. You got to take a more nuanced approach if you're, say, a law firm partner when it comes to content. Maybe you shouldn't be making TikToks. Maybe you should be writing thought leadership pieces on LinkedIn. For me, this is my 6th year now working in legal tech with startups, with earlier stage companies. And for us, I think community building and getting the word out about whether it's ourselves, the company's name, the technology, I think that takes precedence over maybe doing something that is safer. So sometimes I'll put out some hot takes, and I think if I was at a firm, I would probably get reprimanded, but I have never been reprimanded for my content, whether it's Ironclad or previous legal tech companies. It's because I think if you're trying to get your name out, it's a different calculus of capturing attention, being more valuable than potentially offending someone.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people resonate with the content. Like, a lot of this content in the legal industry is very vanilla, very plain, kind of boring. People aren't real. People aren't telling about the real situation. And so when you do come out and with these hot takes publicly under your own name, it's just more compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. So the upside, though, mate, what have you got from it? Like, what's the benefits of having made that pivot and building this audience?
When I first started, it was simple, right? It was as an entry-level salesperson, you're calling people up every day, you're sending cold emails. This became a way to supplement my own pipeline generation. And over time, that the amount of inbound leads that I get has increased steadily, to the point where, at my last job, I was generating a significant part of my pipeline through these activities. And I was generating pipeline for the entire company. It was, I would create content, someone would reach out to me, or they would hear about the company and they would start reaching out to the company for a product demo, for a potential sales conversation. And so I think the reason why Ironclad has been so forward thinking is that they recognize the value of that, and they've formed a community team to really spur conversations, both for digital contracting, but for issues facing the legal industry. And those conversations that are happening, the community that we're building, we don't think of it as, hey, if we do this, we'll get leads. We think of it as, if we create value for this community, good things will happen, which is exactly the same approach that I've taken with my content generation. And so I have been able to source a lot of leads, sales, and all that good stuff, but it really comes from kind of being authentic and kind of telling your own truth, and it's been reflected in the bottom line.
I love that, mate. I mean, I'd speak a lot about how content creates opportunity. And, I think people sometimes, lawyers, a lot of the time, they think about marketing in a certain silo that's only lead generating. But there are so many other opportunities that you get if people know who you are, right? Especially in sales, because even just getting a door to open is a huge bonus. Sure, you might have to make a phone call. Sure, you might have to build a relationship, but the content lets you get through that door. And I guess the company now as well. I'm really interested in the community element. Tell us about that, because I don't think about legal tech and community, to be honest.
Well, community is something that's already there. We just have a label to it. What it really is, if you think about how lawyers have traditionally gotten business, it's word of mouth, it's referrals. You can slap a name on it like customer marketing or community. But what it really is that you're just putting yourself out there among a network of legal professionals and doing good work for them. Whether it's as a law firm or as a legal tech company, being a good vendor to provide value to your clients. The community is already there. Where I think we have created a team specifically called community, it's to make sure that we are continuing to provide value to that group of that network of lawyers and legal professionals, legal operations people, paralegals, everyone. And we expect that good things will come out of that. And so what we see at Ironclad is not just a marketing value, but also people will help each other when it comes to using the product. And they will also tell you, hey, here's what we need to solve. And so for your product roadmap, you should go this direction as opposed to that direction. So all of these good things happen with this when this conversation goes both ways. And I think that it's something we're going to see more of in the coming future. And I feel so lucky that Ironclad has been so forward thinking in that and focusing on that early. Not all legal technology companies understand the value of that.
So, mate, with your videos, what's your ideation process? Do you just sit down and do you say, I'm going to make X amount per week, or is it more you get inspiration by something that's in front of you and you think, bang, I'm going to do a couple of videos because I like this sound. I can see how the sound works. How do you go through that and come up with your ideas?
Well, I think that you do have to have some level of consistency. In 2019 or 2020, I decided I was going to focus on LinkedIn. And so I made it a habit to post every day. And I think that helped me build my audience, but also helped me get better at creating content because I started to understand what was good and what was bad. I think that's one thing that you've really got to focus on, knowing what's good and what's bad. That's judgment that you have to develop over many years. And so for TikTok, I also try to be consistent. I try to make one a day or one every weekday. And sometimes I'll do more, but other times I'll get tired and I'll make it a little bit less. But that consistency is the foundation for the content creation. Once I have that, I try to see what are the important themes that are happening in the profession right now. So substantively, I want to focus the content on those themes. There are certain themes out there, like the tension between legal and sales for in-house lawyers. That's one theme. Another theme is the challenges faced by young lawyers, especially associates at law firms. Mental health, overwork, burnout, those themes are pretty big right now. And so those are some examples of the high level themes. And then when you hear a new sound that's trending, you try to come up with a skit that will show some element of that theme. And so you can I'll create something just after watching a funny video. I'm like, oh, I could actually repurpose this for legal and match up with one of these themes. So it's really hard to explain. Like it's not a strict process like like sitting down and writing a brief. But there's probably some parallels. Like you got to do this brainstorm, and sometimes I'll just be drinking coffee, taking a walk, and I'll be like, oh, I just thought of a good idea, and I immediately have to write it down. So I have documents that are with ideas. So it's a pretty significant creative process, and yeah, it's hard for me to explain exactly how,
I relate to it, man. No, that mine is exactly the same. To be honest, I've got millions of notes on my phone because whether it's like making a voice note when driving, when you hear something, or it's usually
exactly.
driving or in the shower or before bed when you get these crazy ideas and everything falls into place. Like I've got to create a bit of content around that. Bang, bang, put it down. I guess when you're judging it, because, you obviously pay attention to comments and you're engaged with it. And this is one of the big bits that I think a lot of law firms and a lot of professionals miss, is that social media is social and it's not just a dumping ground for content. It's actually an engagement. So how have you managed that and engagement, and what have you seen by actually engaging with people online?
Well, I think, yeah, so you get a lot of ideas from people because they're the ones on the front lines. They're going to tell you whether content is good or not. Sometimes you'll post content that most people disagree with. Like that's not a bad thing. That's you learning, and that's why the dialogue is important, because you want to get that conversation going. So, for example, I've made some videos about making fun of legalese inside of contracts. Some people have commented and said, actually, some of these phrases are quite important. Now, most of the time, people will say, "Oh, these are some of the other phrases that are useless or complicated for no reason." But there are some that are valuable, and so that feedback loop helps me make better content over time. That's a purely selfish way of thinking about it. From how these conversations, these comments help me, but for the community itself, it's helpful too, because I put out a piece of content, and then people comment, and then someone responds, and another person responds. They are meeting each other just because the content is the first step in starting that dialogue. So, I think that comments are so important, and I think people don't focus enough on it. They just want to put something up and then never think about it again when it comes to marketing. But the dialogue and the conversations that happen, that is where the real magic happens.
See, I think what people get hung up on a little bit is that they want to be 100% right all the time. But with content, so much is experimental, and that's actually a lot of the point of social media that gets missed. You actually have the ability to experiment with messaging and work out then the message that resonates. And I think especially lawyers, we all want to be right, but it's very hard to be right at the start. So it's a lot better to float ideas out. And I love that feedback. I love the fact that someone would spend their time actually giving you feedback on a specific word from a contract that you pulled out. That's like a very lawyer thing to do as well, but it's actually super interesting because you get that discussion happening, and someone watches it, they read the comments, and actually learn something from the exercise as well.
I mean, Mike, that's exactly right what you just said. Our profession, this legal industry, focuses on being right before sending something out, for good reason, right? Because if you're dealing with a very serious matter, you want to be very careful. But in the world of content and marketing, I think that iteration matters. I was not as good at making content in the beginning. Now I am, because I put a lot of bad stuff out, and then I got rid of the bad stuff and stayed focused on the good stuff. And then people are still giving me feedback. And so it'll continue to get better. And if I continue to get feedback, it's almost like a two-way street. People will give me ideas for content. They'll say, "Hey, this thing is happening. You should make a video about it." So I think the two-way street is so important. That feedback loop is so important. And being willing to put out something that's bad is going to give you a huge advantage.
Yeah. So I guess, from the perspective of managing it personally, how do you manage being a busy professional and the time that you put in to be consistent like you are, and obviously having a work-life balance yourself, mate? Where do you find the balance?
Well, over time, it's gotten better just because it's become more of an important part of my job. Like, if you could imagine, if I was a law firm associate, 100% of my job would be not related to content. I went to sales. I needed to generate pipeline and do outbound sales activity. So this became supplemental to that. So in the beginning, it was some small percentage of my time, but I would pre-write my content, pre-create my content, and nights and weekends. I remember I had a young child then, and I would sit in the dark writing and typing in the corner of the room, making sure I was staying quiet. I would do things like this, and it was very tiring, but this is why also the evolution of my career from a law firm associate to sales to now community what I do in the community is a lot more relevant to my content creation. Like some of the things that you see, like right now, like TikToks, that's a little bit less connected to community. But for example, for Ironclad, we host a quarterly State of Digital Contracting. It's a 1 hour event where we talk about some theme and contracts. Well, we're starting to loop in content that's sourced from social media, from our community. And we're calling it something like a community voices, where people will share stories about bad experiences with counterparties. I'll reenact some stories and, read out funny responses from the comments. So you can see like the content and my job are closer now, and it's kind of feeding off of each other, as opposed to when I started off in as a law firm associate, it was different. So if you're like a law firm partner, I imagine if your job is to sell and do business development, it's going to be similar. It's going to be working hand in hand with your marketing efforts. And so if you do want to create content, I think you got to think about how everything plays in strategically. This is why I left the world of sales, because I wanted to focus more on the community and sourcing ideas from them, participating and engaging in the comments. That's why I have the job that I have today.
Yeah, mate, I love that, sitting in the quiet, getting the work done. When I was making starting the podcast and starting to write again after many years and actually making things, I used to have to wake up at 4. I'd start at 4 and get it done before the kids were up at about 6, because I had a couple of hours window to actually get something done. And you just do it, especially with young children, right? You just make the time where you can make the time. And it feels a bit ridiculous now, but that's what we do. So I guess that relationship with business development and what you've learned over the last, 5, 6, 7 years in BD and law, what do you think legal tech and law firms, what can they do better from a business development perspective?
Well, I think those are two different groups that have different challenges.
Yeah.
Maybe
the legal tech side, yeah.
Yeah, for legal tech, I would say that there's a lot of things that legal tech companies can do that law firms can't, like do a lot of outbound sales. Like in the US, you're supposed to wait for potential clients to reach out to you versus you going out and reaching out to them if they're an individual. And so for tech, you can actually go out and just say, hey, I'm going to cold call, I'm going to do cold outreach to potential clients. So I think legal tech has an advantage over, for example, law firms. Now, when it comes to content, I think where legal tech could use some help is that I think there's a lot of focus on things that are established, that work. For example, outbound sales, cold calling works, and cold emailing work. These are established processes that have very low ROI just because everyone's tired of getting cold called, everyone's tired of getting cold emailed. Content is a way to cut through all that noise. But the reason why a lot of tech companies don't do it is because it's hard to measure its impact. Now, when I was an individual salesperson, I saw the full cycle. I saw myself putting out content, people reaching out to me, generating those leads. But when you're talking about a whole company doing this, you've got to basically pinpoint, okay, when did that person decide to reach out to you? Was that affected by the content? And so I believe that it is, and it's hard to measure, and that's why it's so effective. And I think that in a few years, content will be less effective than it is now. I think right now it is super effective because a lot of people don't understand how it works, and so there's an opportunity. And so that I think is where legal tech could do a little better. I think law firms have even more challenges. I think law firms are used to doing things like following precedent, using established templates in their work. And so they were going to need to take the same approach for business development. Like if you ask any lawyer at a firm, you say, what do you do for business development? They're probably going to say, I just take these people out for dinner. We just meet and, over time, I don't know how it happens. I just, make some, I just get some deals. That works, but that's not taking advantage of the biggest opportunities that are out there right now. So I think both law firms and legal tech companies, there's a lot more that they can all do to leverage content marketing.
Yeah, well, it's leveraging your time and reaching an audience. I remember a few times when clients, the penny is dropped in a conversation and they're like, well, you're right. And even for me, when I think back about starting the podcast, I was running a recruitment consultancy. We were headhunters. I was making 50 calls a day. I did that for like a decade.
Yeah.
And for me, I heard someone at a conference say, "Oh, it's like having, a seminar every week with 100 people. If you have 100 people listening to your podcast." And that was the moment for me thinking, wow, I can duplicate my time. Like, even if 100 people listen to my podcast, which is kind of funny now. And I think that time duplication, that ability to reach another audience, that's the thing. And I wonder with legal tech, if it's being held back by the fact that a lot of founders are former lawyers and there is a lack of creativity in, content and brand and marketing, because of that, because there's a certain way that things are being done. I know in Australia, very few people in legal tech space at all invest in content. So I wonder if people are either waiting to see others do it, so then they jump in. But you're right, like the opportunity is there now, especially organically, whether it's TikTok or whether it's LinkedIn, but even Facebook, right? Even Facebook ads are super cheap way to still reach an audience, and still a great way to grow your brand. So I have wondered about the resistance and whether it's just because business has been easy in law firms, so they why change something that works? But for legal tech, that point of resistance is, I've struggled to get my head around it. I don't know if it's a bit of, the fact that the founders are lawyers, plus in tech, it's I'll build it and they will come kind of mentality. If you build it, they will, and sometimes you need to flip that and build the brand first, and then that attracts people into wanting to use your product. So I guess, how do you communicate within a business if, because marketing professionals or other BD professionals in law firms sitting there who will be listening to this show and think, yeah, this sounds great, Mike and Alex, but, what are some steps, I guess, that firms or legal tech can take? Is it just jump in and try, or get a strategy and then, iterate like you have?
Mike, I think that's a great question. I don't know why that is, that a lot of these folks think about marketing differently. For me, I can share, I think this podcast is going to be super helpful, because I'll share with you what's happened to me, which is, my content by this point gets 3 to 4 million views every month. And if you think about how much that costs to get from, Google Ads or something like that, you can calculate the value of it.
Yeah.
And, anecdotally, I can tell you, I went to a in-person networking event for the ACC last week in LA. I didn't know anybody there. And when I showed up, like, I think half the people recognized me and they looked at my name tag and they're like, "What's Ironclad?" Like, I don't know what that is. And so it just reflects that whatever content you put out there, people are watching and they will recognize what you're talking about, and they will learn about the company if you have someone kind of put themselves out there. And it will always be true until there's this moment right now where it's kind of fuzzy because there's no established metrics around it. In other words, it's not like, say, I put in $100 and I'll get $100 of business out of it. It's kind of amorphous, and that presents an opportunity because if it was proven out, then everyone else would do it. It would get bid up. Just look at what's happening to Google Ads right now.
Yeah.
They're becoming less effective as they're getting more expensive, because maybe in the early days they were really effective because most people were uncomfortable using it. But as people become more comfortable with a certain approach, it becomes saturated and less effective. The same is true for outbound emails. Like, think about, there's all these articles about how outbound emails for legal tech are getting really annoying and not effective. This is not an accident. This is not a coincidence. And so for these firms that are trying to get out there, whether it's a legal tech company or a firm trying to do something different, I would say, see if there's anybody who's willing on the team to experiment, and it doesn't have to be a grand, you don't have to allocate budget or hire some big name influencer. You can just have someone run an experiment, run a weekly podcast, put out some content on LinkedIn, very small percentage of their time, kind of what I did, like when I first started out in legal tech, nobody told me to do this. I just did it because I I wanted to, and I saw the value of it. And so I think I would encourage organizations to encourage their own people to start putting content out there. It doesn't have to be TikToks. It could be whatever medium you're comfortable with. But I think there's a real opportunity right now, and a lot of people are not taking advantage of it.
Yeah, the opportunity bit. I told this story lots of times, but in my former business, we'd spend 10 grand a month just comfortably on ads in one legal publication, just one of the legal publications, just for brand. And it wasn't lead generating because I wanted
Mm-hmm.
people to know that we were running campaign for, this firm and that firm. And I didn't anticipate people would call up because of it. It was just, it had our brand on it. And
Mm-hmm.
I see now, wow, that's 10 grand a month, the reach you could get with the amount of content if you did it really well. And this is the opportunity for bigger businesses as well. Like, that ability to get in front of people, and it's not just consumer, but it's B2B. The amount of times I've just walking down the street and you'll find the same, as you said, like they read the name tag. I'll have my Beyond Billables shirt on. I've been accosted on the streets of Sydney and Melbourne by random lawyers just say, "Hey, Mike, I've listened to the show for years. Just want to say g'day." And it's amazing how that can open doors. But it's amazing to me how bigger firms and bigger legal tech businesses just aren't taking advantage of it. Like the pure cost benefit to investing in good content. And it doesn't have to be memes, although memes are great and you can certainly play with that. But like, who's reading long form written blog content that's being dumped onto LinkedIn now? No one. Versus an infographic or some nice the document or a carousel type slider. And the opportunity is there. I think that with professional services, it's kind of, social media is a bit like websites were 15 years ago. And that 15 years ago, websites were still important. But now everyone knows 100% must have a good looking website because people are going to check your website out. People aren't yet realizing that their social footprint is exactly the same as their website. And so they're haven't been prepared to invest time or effort or the money in getting that right. But the opportunity is there just because the freaking audience is there. And I just know how much money it cost me to reach an audience back in the good old days pre-internet versus now. And we had a reel that had 10.3 million views. A little brand and marketing agency in Brisbane, which is kind of crazy. And so if you're thinking
Yeah.
bigger than that, if you're thinking, I want to reach an audience, it's kind of there for you. Anyway, that's my rant about it. How Alex, how do you manage, I guess, the personal not insecurity, because obviously that's not a thing, but when you're sitting there thinking, do I really press go on this? What's your thought process like that? And, I guess there would be negative comments as well. How do you manage that balance for your own mental health, mate?
Yeah, I mean, it gets better over time. If you start off and you post your first thing, your second thing, you're going to get really worried about the reaction, just like I did when I first started out. But over time, it gets better. And then you realize a couple of things. Like you realize that, yeah, these people will leave you mean comments or disagree with you. And you might be worried that they're going to think less of you. But these weren't people that were going to give you business anyways. These were not going to be people who were going to help you. And so, what you will find are a larger number of people who say, hey, I actually can relate to that. And by the way, I want to get to know you. What do you do? What's your product? What's your service? There's always a trade-off. And if you understand kind of the theme that I've kind of been getting at, it's if there's no downside, then there's no opportunity. Like that is true in many areas of life, and it's certainly in this area. And so one day, maybe there will be a way to create content perfectly with no haters, no mean comments, and it'll give you all the business you ever need. But when that day comes, that opportunity is going to be gone because it'll be either super expensive or not effective. And that could be, decades later. I don't know when that's going to happen, but but the opportunity comes hand in hand with some of these challenges. And I want to hit on that last point you made about mental health. I think it's really important to focus on making sure you're not doing anything that'll be too much for you. Like, in other words, social media, there's a lot of downsides to social media. We're talking about the upside. There's a lot of downsides too. And I think that's why I would focus on the community element more, the comments, the interactions, the high quality conversations, because if you just read the content, it is, and you read the hateful comments, the mean comments, and also if something doesn't get as many likes as you think you should get, or views, that can be pretty tough. So I would say focus on the community and just building relationships. I think that's the right focus.
That's brilliant, mate. And I guess from that mental health perspective, you talk about it a lot in your videos. What do you think we can be doing better as a profession? Just shedding more light on it, but what other things do you think we really need to be doing?
I think at the highest level, we got to re-examine all of the ways that things are structured. So, for example, I think that in big firms, a lot of associates are overworked and burned out. And some of the things they'd like include more flexibility in how they work, like working from home, working remotely. People have childcare responsibilities, other family responsibilities. They need to balance with that work. And so firms, I think, should really think through, okay, we are now in a new age where we've got remote work with technology that enables remote work much more better than 10, 20 years ago. Does it make sense to have FaceTime in the office? And those are some of the things we got to question, some of these assumptions that we've always had about the practice of law, about the profession. Is the bar exam, for example, in the US, is it actually protecting the public like they say it is, or is it just a barrier that prevents access to justice and keeps a lot of people out of the profession? We've got to re-examine all of these things, and I feel like that's a long slog, a long journey, but these conversations are happening now, and I think that over time things are gonna change in the profession.
Yeah, absolutely. Structural change and that big level change has to obviously happen and then filter down so that, because it's very hard for associates to make change, for instance, when you're part of the machine. But I 100%
That's
agree.
right.
I think it's all of our responsibility to speak about it. And I love the aspect about access to justice, because a bit of me always thinks that, in the profession, we tend to be very inward looking and talking about ourselves and talking about how we do things and how it affects us. But for a lot of lawyers, they became lawyers to do better, like to make an impact, whatever that is, or have a desire. And we all, have that passion that we can connect to. Well, not all, but, there's a lot of people do. And access to justice is one thing. And I think that's actually one area where, funny enough, you don't see a lot of good content, a lot of good joke or meme content either around like this huge middle that in Australia, so we, have big issues with access to justice at the lower and the middle end for really different reasons. But very few people talk about it. And I'd be surprised if it's any different in the US. Because and that's actually a really interesting opportunity to speak about, and how we can do better, I guess, to reach audiences and to reach the public. And what you're talking about, making content, at the end of the day, it's communication, it's relationship building, it's outreach, and there's huge role to play, from an access to justice perspective, because half people don't even know that they need a lawyer most of the time when they've got a legal problem, right? And that's because we've done a really poor job communicating to the market about what we do and we don't do as lawyers. So yeah, look, the opportunity is huge. And I guess, Alex, when, final question, like when you look back over the last couple of years, what would you do differently? And, what are you planning to do now to position yourself, for the next 5 years?
I think that if you take a grand scheme of my career, the grand view of my career, I think I have always tried to force things to happen. So for example, I thought I wanted to be a successful lawyer. So I made myself do things, and those things were not always the right thing for me. So for example, I went to big law. I thought I wanted to be a prosecutor. I thought I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I think what I would have done differently is to really understand what I'm good at, what I'm bad at, what I like doing, what I find energizing, and lean into that more quickly. So I've been trying to do that, and that prompted my move to community as opposed to being in sales, because you can make a lot of money in sales. It's an understood profession, but community is not. But I really enjoy it, and so I've been leaning more towards doing things that I feel like I have a chance of being great at, and that obviously has to be something that is in line with my personality, my strengths, and my weaknesses. So expect to see more of that. I think that Ironclad is doing some really interesting things in this community side. We are developing programming, events, fostering connections. And I feel like that is actually very exciting for the next few years. And then for myself, continuing with the intersection between content, community, and the legal space, I'll share with you, Mike, like I haven't shared this with anybody, but I've started conversations with some of these larger Instagram meme accounts, like off the record. Like there's a lot that's happening in this greater, in our greater community for the legal profession. And it's not just lawyers, it's also paralegals, legal assistants, legal operations. And I think lots of interesting things are happening, and I'm just trying to lean into it and kind of be at the cutting edge of it and learn as I go, and keep the journey fun.
Awesome, mate. Every time you mention something, I think about one of your videos and how I've got a smile on my face around it. But look, thank you very much for being on the show. It's been awesome. I can't wait to see what you have in store for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks so much for listening to the Beyond Billables podcast. If you didn't know, we're actually a brand and marketing agency that helps law firms, legal tech startups, and legal services businesses around the world. Our focus is helping our clients build valuable long-term brands, and we do that through brand strategy, through branding and design, website builds, social media, and content projects. No matter where you are in the world, we've worked with firms for over 15 years in multiple jurisdictions, and we're always happy to chat. If you want to chat about a project, drop me an email at michael@beyondbillables.com or connect on social media. Thanks so much for listening to the show.